It was a recent. It was the yard side a couple of days ago.
Okay, so I noticed on the sign that it was called a Fabrengen, which is appropriate because it's not a tish because there's no table. There's no table, so that means it's not a tish. So Fabrengen is the right terminology. Also, we have a Chabadnik here, so that's also proper terminology. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. We have a token Chabadnik. At this point, people tend to ask me if I'm Chabad because I have a long beard, but normally I have longer payas. They ask me if I'm Breslov, but now I'm okay. I could still hide the payas, so I don't have to be Chabad. But Fabrengen has a certain. Fabrengen, the word literally means to come to spend time together, which is what we're doing. And the Fabrengen has certain elements. The Fabrengen usually has some food, has l'chaim. If I'm not mistaken, I believe the 7th Lubavitch Rebbe was makbid that anyone under 40 shouldn't drink more than 4 l'chaims. That was the hakpada that the Rebbe had. So if you're over 40, and there's nigunim, there's making l'chaim and eating some food, and there's Torah. So we'll sing a nigun and then maybe we'll learn a little. And I don't, I'm sensitive to the time, obviously, but we'll try to learn a little bit together. But following the derech of those who began this journey, you begin with a nigun. So we're still holding on to Hallel a little bit. The Gemara says anyone who says Hallel every single day is Machayef and Magadi. If we don't, I'm not going to say the whole thing, but we'll sing one nigun from Hallel that we're still holding on to a little. Keili ato v'yoideko ayelo kaya yemeko keili ato v'yoideko keili ato v'yoideko Yelokai Aroi Mimeko Yekeili Ato V'Yoyedeko Aroi Mimeko Keili Ato V'Yoyedeko So when Ben suggested the idea of having a Rosh Chodesh Fabrengen, I thought it would be kedai to give kavod to my father. My father is an ophthalmologist. His name is Dr. Jerry Weinberg. He's also he's an ophthalmologist, but he's also a big Talmud Chacham. And his entry into Torah came about through, he grew up, going to a school called BTA, Brooklyn Torah Academy, which is very similar to MTA for those who came from the States, which is run-of-the-mill, modern Orthodox, angsty teenage, high school, where Mistama in his day, there were old European rabbis who didn't fully understand the Bachrim, and the Bachrim certainly didn't understand the holiness of their old European rabbis. And so Shabbos, Kashrus, which I don't take for granted that he was able to have that. And then later in life, he became very turned on to Torah study, both the revealed Gemara, Halacha, and also the less revealed, because of a sefer called Bnei Yisachar. The sefer Bnei Yisachar, pronounced Bnei Yisachar, even though the name is Yisachar, was written by someone named Rav Tzvi Melech of Dinov, and the sefer works by going through the different months of the calendar. And when Ben floated this idea of having perhaps, maybe the first of, perhaps there'll be more, of a monthly Rosh Chodesh gathering to celebrate the coming of the new month, Kein Yerbu, Mitzvah Hashem, that it would be kedai to maybe begin to study a little bit the Avodah of the month, which is very much in the vein of the Bnei Yisachar. I'm not going to quote the Bnei Yisachar tonight, but to understand that there's such an inyan of the Avodah of the month. And one of the things I think that really dramatically changed my life from the time that I was 18, 19 years old until now, is that one of the ways that I feel that I've been able to attempt to continue to grow in my Avodas Hashem is to be connected to the Jewish calendar, to be connected to understand that time is not just this. And one of the ways that I've kept myself sane during Corona is by riding the waves of the Jewish calendar, by being attached to the inyan of the Zman, so that what's happening this month is not happening next month, is not the same thing over and over again, and to really feel a certain sense of both progression and a real change in the atmosphere. And the only way that a person can do that is through study, through Torah study. So we know that there are different times. There are different times in a person's life. There are different times in the year. And the pasuk that describes these different times more than anything else, although of course this is not talking about the month, it's talking about different times in the world. It became a famous pop song in the 60s and 70s, based on the words of the wisest of all men, Sefer Koheles, that Shlomo Melech said, Eis laledes ve'eis lamut. There's a time to give birth and a time to die. A time to be born and a time to die. There's a time for planting and there's a time for uprooting. There's a time to kill, Rachmana litzlan. There's a time to heal. There's a time to break down the throats, and there's a time to livnot. There's different times that we have in a person's life. One of the interesting things that we find, a whole long list of many different itim, many different times. And one of the things that we find in Pasuk Zayin, of Perek Gimel, we find eis lachashot ve'eis ledaber. There's a time to be silent, to lachashot, to whisper, to be quiet, and there's a time to speak. There's a time to be silent and to be quiet, and there's a time ledaber, to speak a lot. And last time that we got together, we spoke a little bit about dibur and amira, but now it's time to speak about a little bit about being silent, about whispering, about quieting down a little bit. Rav Shimshon Raphael Hirsch, how could I not? Rav Shimshon Raphael Hirsch in the Sefer, in one of his Sfarim, which is part of the Kol Kisvei, in a small kuntris that he wrote called the Ma'agolei Hashana. Rav Shimshon Raphael Hirsch himself has, it's not quite like the Bnei Yisachar in terms of the Ramazim and that type of, that wasn't his chelik in Torah. Everyone has a chelik in Torah. Rav Shimshon Raphael Hirsch in the Sefer B'Ma'agalei Hashana describes in the fourth mimer, every month he gives different explanations of what the avodah of each month is, and going through the different the Ma'agalei Hashana. It literally means the wheel, so to speak, of the year. And he writes so beautifully there that the name of the Chodesh of Cheshvan, to be properly understood, needs to be separated into its elements. He says, Yesh li parid bo es hashorish hamila chashu. We need to separate the word chashu from the nun sofit at the end. And that makes a lot of sense, because the nun sofit at the end of a word has a very specific function. Everybody who learns Torah is lomeid Torah, but a person learns Torah all the time, everybody knows is a lamdan. the nun sofit at the end. And someone who stole something once did an act of gezel, but if he does it all the time, then it becomes his permanent job, and he becomes a gazlan. Person makes a joke, you say, you're being a late, but if he's a professional clown, he becomes a leitzan. A nun sofit at the end of a word, as the nun itself kind of almost looks like the nun sofit is like dragging it down to the, in science and math, there's a description of something being dragged to the nth degree. The nth degree is the nunth degree, being drawn to mamish to the extreme, all the way down, pulling the thing all the way down. And so the word cheshvan, Rav Shimshon Raphael Hirsch writes so beautifully, comes from a lashon of chashu, to whisper, to be quiet, to quiet things down. But not just to whisper, but to bring it, cheshvan, to whisper all the time, to bring things down to a place of utter quiet. Shorsh ze matzbiya al ofyo shel hachodesh. This points with a finger to the very nature of what this month is all about. The nature of the Chodesh of Cheshvan, Chodesh Lefanav Haya Kulo, the month that came before this was Kulo Merov Chagim U'Pi'ilos Tziboriot. It was all communal, getting together, even within our crazy upside down world that we have right now. There's a sense that we were able still to get together and to try with so much effort from this holy Chabura to get together and to do something Simchas Torah and to be able to celebrate as a tzibur and to do halal together and to grow as a community. And it's very communal oriented. Tishrei is filled with Chagim and community building. Va'ata, listen to the words of Rav Hirsch, Va'ata nichnas ha'yehudi lechodesh chashu. Chodesh shel his, a little bit a person comes to a place of his ragua, he comes to a place of hisragus, v'sheket. Because the dagesh of the point of the month of Cheshvan is Yoser al Chai HaYachid. It's much more about the individual life. It's about a random Wednesday night in the middle of Cheshvan when you come home after a long day of work and you recognize, I forgot to daven Mariv. And it's too late and now no one else is davening and I missed it. And I'm already, in pajamas. I already took off my shirt and I'm ready to go to sleep, and no one's around. And I say, you know what? Afal Pikain, this is the month of whispering. It's the month of whispering. Merach, like Rav Simcha Bunim of Pshischa said, it's a lashon of, like we find the Gemara says in Chagiga about some of the certain Talmidim. These Talmidim looked like they were deaf, and they came to the Beis Medrash and they would sit and they would hear. They would sit and everyone was wondering what they were doing, and they would be merachish sfasayim. They would move their lips. Mar Cheshvan is a lashon of merachish. Mar Cheshvan merachish. To murmur with one's lips, to whisper a little bit. Because the inyan of the month of Cheshvan, the whole Avodah of the month of Cheshvan, is to bring ourselves to a place where even when no one else is around, it's easy a little bit to scream at the top of our lungs when we're standing with the tzibur, but when we're not with anybody else, how do we comport ourselves when no one else is around? How do I comport? How does Dovid'l comport himself when there's no one else is around? And this is a big Avodah. This we find, it's not coincidental. One of my favorite passages from all of Tanakh. I was zoche to major in Tanakh in university. That was my major. I somehow missed the opportunity to do that in the beginning. I didn't know that there was such a thing. So I started as a major in psychology. I ended up being a minor in psychology and majoring in Tanakh. I had a very good rabbi named Rabbi Chaim Angel, who is Kishmo Kenhu. One of my favorite passages in all of Tanakh is the story of Eliyahu Navi after the showdown with the Nevi'ei Habal, something that became beloved to me after learning it properly with one of my Rebbeim, Rav Judah Michel, Beit Shemesh. And that's the story of Eliyahu Navi after the showdown with the Nevi'ei Habal when he goes into the cave. And he runs away because there's a warrant out for his arrest. More than that, they want to behead him. And he runs away to a cave and he's totally dejected. And he turns to Rabbon Shalom's in Malachim Aleph, Perek Tazayin, and he turns to the Perek Yotes. Depends on I'm dealing here with the Koran Tanakh. So there's different prakim. They weren't Gores, the Christian Girsa. And he goes to the cave, and all of a sudden Hashem starts speaking to him. He says, "What are you doing here, Eliyahu Navi? What are you doing here?" And Eliyahu Navi starts to complain to Hashem. And he says that they want to kill me. I did everything for your honor, Rabbon Shalom. What's going on? And Hashem says, Look out into this valley below the cave, Eliyahu. And Hashem shows Eliyahu these remarkable, almost certain prophetic type of images. He shows him like an earthquake and a fire and a storm, a tempest wind. And each time he shows him one of these imageries, he says to Eliyahu, that's not where I am. Lo baruchi Hashem. Hashem is not in the ruach. Hashem is not in the eish. Hashem is not in the earthquake. Hashem is found in the kol d'mamadaka. Hashem is found in the kol d'mamadaka. And what's remarkable about this passage is that what happened immediately before this is that Eliyahu Hanavi was standing there with the Nevi'ei Habal, and the Nevi'ei Habal were all, and Am Yisrael, all of Am Yisrael was saying, we're going to follow after Hashem, and they were all screaming, Hashem hu Elokim, Hashem hu Elokim, Hashem hu Elokim. Sounds familiar, no? That's what we were all doing just a few minutes ago. And Eliyahu Hanavi afterwards is sitting there in the cave, and he says, maybe there's a new derech. There's a derech of cheshvan, of whispering, the kol d'mamadaka. Hashem says, these big moments where a person comes and stands face to face with, hundreds and thousands of people and screams, Hashem hu Elokim, that's one level of serving Hashem. But there's another level of serving Hashem when you're all alone. And it's just you and your Rebbitzin at the dining room table, and you have a juicy piece of Lashon Hara to say, and it's just the Chai HaYachid, and you stop yourself and you say, I'm not going to say it. When I'm with everybody and there's a big tumult, it's very easy to get into that place. But the truth is that to get into a realm where we're able to understand that Hashem wants something deeper of us, that's something else. Schwab, who was a great darshan, in the Sefer Mayan Beis HaShoeva, in the back, after he has his chidushim on the Torah, he, just make sure, let's see what time it is. When he has his chidushim on the Torah, afterwards he has some chidushim on the rest of Tanakh. He has some on Shas, very few, and some haftorahs and some little moadim and the Megillas. Po v'sham. And he has a beautiful, beautiful pshat in a pasuk in Shir Hashirim. Amazing pshat in a pasuk in Shir Hashirim. Pasuk says in Shir Hashirim, Ma yafu pamayich b'na'alayim bas nediv. How beautiful, how exalted are the footsteps. Yafu pamayich b'na'alayim, the footsteps of the bas nediv, of the daughter of noblemen. B'na'alayim, in shoes. How beautiful are the footsteps of those who are walking, who are the bas nediv, who are the daughters, the descendants of the nediv, of the noblemen. And the Gemara tells us in Chagiga that, on Daf Gimel and Aleph, that this is a reference to Am Yisrael who are going Aliyah L'Regel. When Am Yisrael are going up, how beautiful are the footsteps of the Bas Nediv, of those who are the Nediv is Avram Avinu, those who are the descendants of Avram Avinu who was the first to make his way up to Har Maria by Akedas Yitzchak. How beautiful are the footsteps of Am Yisrael who are Hamayich, they're pitter-pattering their way up to Har Bayis, just like Avram Avinu, the Bas Nediv. And Rav Schwab asks a Gavaldik question. He says the Gemara in Brachos tells us explicitly in the last parak, in Parak HaRoeh, that a person is not permitted to enter Har Bayis wearing shoes. Ma yafu pamayich b'na'alayim bas nadiv. How beautiful are you who are walking up to Har Bayis b'na'alayim in your shoes? The Gemara says in Chagiga, this is a reference to the bringing of the carbon re'iyah, the olas re'iyah, when a person goes up to be seen and to see, like the Gemara says in Chagiga. So what's the pshat? B'na'alayim, we're not supposed to wear shoes. You're not allowed to wear shoes on Har Bayis. So Schwab says so beautifully that Ma yafu pamayich b'na'alayim bas nadiv is a reference to the fact how beautiful it is when the Jewish people not are going up to Har Bayis, but how beautiful it is when they leave Har Bayis and they take what they got from Har Bayis with them. Ma yafu pamayich b'na'alayim is talking about when the Jewish people put their shoes back on and bring whatever they got from Har Bayis back home. The tachlis of going to Har Bayis, like Sefer Chinuch writes, and as is so obvious, just the mitzvah itself, is that we come and we check in a few times a year, lefachot, to come up to Har Bayis and to check in, to be seen by Hashem and to see Hashem, to see the love that Hashem has for the Jewish people, to part the paroches and to see the kruvim embracing. Ma yafu pa'amayich b'na'alayim. How beautiful it is when we put our shoes back on and we go home, says Rav Schwab. Not when we're able to experience this big fanfare and this whole thing. The Gemara says, the Tanchuma says that the reason that the Luchos Rishonos were broken is because they were given b'pumbi, because they were given in this big fanfare, but the second were given b'chashu. They were given with this Indian of Cheshvan. And the month of Cheshvan has no holidays. Mar Cheshvan, it's the bitter month of Cheshvan because it has no holidays, but the Tzaddikim said that Mar Cheshvan is actually a lashon of, if you flip the word Marchesh, it's Ram Cheshvan. They used to call it the Ram Cheshvan, the exalted month of Cheshvan. Because on a certain level, how beautiful it is when a person puts their head on the pillow after a long day of work, of watching their eyes and being careful with brachos, saying a good Asher Yatzar and stopping yourself with, instead of walking while you're saying Asher, stop for 30 seconds and being by yourself and really just being together with Hashem for 30 seconds in a day, and you put your head down on the pillow at the end of the day and you whisper to Hashem, thank you for making me Jew. Thank you for making me a Jewish person. On a certain level, that's greater than the screaming at the top of our lungs, Hashem hu Elokim, Hashem hu Elokim, Hashem hu Elokim. That's taking our visit to Yom Noraim in shoes. So just a few more minutes to maybe bring this to another level, to deepen our appreciation of this idea. And by all means, anybody who needs to go and is tired, it's late. Or to close your eyes a little, that's also good. I could put you into a meditative trance, that's also good. But just to go a little bit l'chaim to all of you. Chaim, what's that? And maybe if it wasn't so late and there were neighbors, maybe we'd do another niggin to wake everybody up. But everyone seems okay. I'm just sensitive. Yeah. So let's maybe take this. Let's take this one step. Let's take this one step deeper, a little bit deeper. So already we find this idea in the Zohar Kadosh, but it's brought out so beautifully by the Sefer Bas Ayin. Bas Ayin was, for all intents and purposes, was a chassid who came to Eretz Yisrael and lived in Sfas. And in Parshas Vayetze, he has an essay where he talks about this very mysterious pasuk that Yaakov Avinu is described. Vayar Hashem ki snua Leah. Hashem saw that Leah was snua. Vayiftach es rachma v'rachel akara. And he allowed Leah to be able to conceive. Thank you. Conceive, whereas Rachel was barren. And the Bas Ayin explains, based on the Zohar Chadash, and based on, we find this already earlier, an allusion to this in the Zohar and Chelik Beis, in the Zohar itself, that Rachel and Leah represent these two different worlds. Yaakov Avinu, who is this, has this ability to transcend. He's Yoshev Ohalim, plural. He knows how to balance. And so it's appropriate that even though this is one of the great tragedies of our history is that Lavan tricked Yaakov into marrying two wives. Yosef Engel speaks about this at length in Halacha and in Machshava, in Tiferes Yosef, that this is one of the great tragedies of all of world history. But on a certain level, there is a certain concept that Yaakov should be married to these two women, and each of them represents kind of a different world. In the language of the Zohar Kadosh, if everyone's over 40 and can drink more than 4 l'chaims, then so the Zohar Kadosh uses this lashon of Rachel is called the Alma de Isgalia, the revealed world. Rachel is beautiful. Rachel has Yosef HaTzadik. Rachel has Binyamin. It's a revealed world where everything looks good, and she was the chosen one. She was the one that Yaakov really intended to love. And Leah is called the Alma de Iskasia, the hidden world. Leah is the one who's crying. She's the one she literally married Yaakov by being hidden. And Leah is the one who's buried in Maras Machpelah. She's buried hidden inside of a cave, whereas Rachel's buried in Bisgalia out on the road. She's buried out on the road. And they represent these two different worlds, the world of Isgalia and the world of Iskasia. And the Bas Ayin explains that that's why Leah is called Snua. On a deeper level, Yaakov Avinu represents, says the Bas Ayin, on a certain level, represents every single Jew. Every Jew is Yaakov Avinu. Like we find already that the image of Yaakov Avinu is etched on the Kisei HaKavod that represents every single Jew. Yaakov Avinu, the Gemara says, had the Shefrayed Adam Arishon. He looked like Adam Arishon. Adam Arishon, Atem Krim Adam. Am Yisrael is Krim Adam. And so Yaakov Avinu, that means a Jew is married to, has this concept in some way, he's connected to an outer world and an inner world. Every one of us has an outer world and an inner world. The outer world is the world where we're beautiful and we're tzaddikim, and we have an inner world where things are not so simple. At least I do. And the inner world is that world where nobody gets to see it. And on a certain level, that world is called the world that's snu'ah. it's dejected, it's hated, it's something that we don't pay attention to, we don't give it its proper due. And yet the Ribono Shel Olam, in a certain way, impregnates that hidden world. That somehow, that hidden world that we, it begins in this very tzanuadik way, that what happens between Yaakov Avinu and one of his wives happens in a very tzanua way. Once there's an impregnation, that impregnation starts to show a little bit. And that hidden world starts to become revealed. And so Leah, even though she's snua, even though she's disregarded in a certain way, Hashem allows for there to be something so that ultimately Yaakov Avinu will feel attached to Leah because it bears fruits, it bears peros. Not only in the negative sense, not in some sinister sense, but the hidden world, those hidden things that nobody knows, the matan d'seiser, the giving that nobody knows about, and the things that we do that nobody knows about, those are the things that are representative of that inner world. And so just for the last 10 minutes or so, I just want to share a chiddush of sorts that I think is based on something I saw many years ago in the Yaris Dvash. That's quite startling. And the way that I'll enter into it is because we're bridging now Tishrei to Cheshvan, so we're still holding by Hilchos Tshuva a little bit. The Rambam in the 5th parak of Hilchos Tshuva, the Rambam writes that he speaks a lot about free will in Hilchos Tshuva, which is mysterious. What does that have to do with Tshuva? There's a lot in the Torah of the Mea Shiloch and Ishbitz about free will and Tshuva and how those have to do with each other. And Soloveitchik spoke about this a lot. But the Rambam has this whole thing about free will in the 5th parak. And in the 5th parak, in the very first halacha, the Rambam wants to make it clear to us that every person has free will. To be the biggest tzaddik that ever was, or to be the biggest rasha that ever was. And the example that the Rambam gives for who are the archetypical models for being a tzaddik or being a rasha. So the Rambam uses the example. He says, anybody who wants could be as big a tzaddik as Moshe Rabbeinu. Or if they want, Rahman al-Islam, they could be as evil as Yeravam ben Nevat. Shalom Adamizah. They could be as evil as Yeravam ben Nevat. Yeravam ben Nevat. I mean, I would venture to guess that if I would ask for a show of hands, there probably maybe are even some people here who, if I would say, who is Yeravam ben Nevat? I'm not sure. A little bit. I heard of him and didn't hear of him. And we would think the most evil man to ever live would be someone we would have heard of. So who is this Yeravam ben Nevat? And what was this Rambam? To be the most evil man who ever lived, this is Yeravam ben Nevat. It was a very mysterious comment of the Yaris Dvash in the 15th drasha in the first chelek, where he says, no raos. I just read this one line. He says that the shoresh of the apikorsus shel Yeravam ben Nevat, the shoresh of the apikorsus of Yeravam ben Nevat, who according to the Rambam, based on the Mishnah and Avos, is the most evil of all people. The shoresh of the Ra, of the most evil person who ever lived, says the Yaris Dvash, apikorsus shel Yeravam ben Nevat, sha'asa de Cheshvan chag. He made a Yom Tov in Cheshvan, the audacity. In Ram Cheshvan, in Mar Cheshvan, he decided he's going to make a yontif. And this is what we find in Malachim, let's say from Malachim, that Yeravam ben Nevat closed down the roads that would lead to the Beis HaMikdash. And he said, no one's going for Sukkos up to Har Bayis, Ma'yafu b'Pamayach Bas Nadiv, none of that. No one's going up by Tishrei. We're instead going to have these two epicenters, not in Yerushalayim, but in the two extremities of Eretz Yisrael. We're going to have in Beersheba and Dan, right? In Beersheba and Dan, up north in Dan, and all the way down south in Beersheba. And that's where you can go, and you can go dafka on the 15th of Cheshvan, not on the 15th of Tishrei. And he made gazunta golden calves there, Nina Gavasenu Biyadenu. And that was the big apikorsus of Yeravam ben Nevat. It's a pshat. So the pshat is that Yeravam ben Nevat, just 5 more minutes, Yeravam ben Nevat's whole inyan was that Yeravam ben Nevat was obsessed with this inyan of screaming loud. Even just from what we just said, that Yeravam ben Nevat decided that we're not going to celebrate in Yerushalayim, in the center, in the heart of Eretz Yisrael, but we need to do it on the borders so that the nations can see our celebration. We're going to do it in the northern border and the southern border, so that all the nations on all sides, right? Not on the sides where there's an ocean and a river. Not going to do that. We're going to do it on the two open borders where we'll be able to, our enemies or the nations around will be able to see how Jewish people celebrate. Yeravim ben Nevat, even the lashon of Navat comes from Ben Navat, right? So that was his father's name, but Navat comes from a lashon of to look at. To be a Ben Navat, like a Ben Torah, we're not the biological children of Torah, but we are the output of the influence of the Torah. He's a Ben Navat. And in fact, Chazal say about Yeravim ben Nevat that his whole inyan was he was Machtias Harabim. He was Machtias Harabim. He was Chotel Machtias Harabim. Because he was obsessed with this outside, external world of what the Rabbim think. That's why the first time we come face to face with Yeravim ben Nevat, this is Pilei Ploim, and Malachim Aleph, the very first time we're introduced to Yeravim ben Nevat, the Navi tells us in Malachim Aleph that Yeravim ben Nevat was an Eved to Shlomo Melech. Yeravim ben Nevat, Efrati min Atzreida, he was Efrati, and his mother's name was Arua. She was an Isha Almana, and he was an Eved l'Shlomo. He was born as an Eved l'Shlomo. Vayaram Yad B'Melech. He raised his hand against the king. This is what he did to raise his hand against the king. Bana es mulu seger es peretz ir David Aviv. Yeravim ben Nevat said, Shlomo Melech, you're an Avarian, because you're building up the walls that were breached of Ir David. In other words, there were walls around Yerushalayim, and at a certain point, those walls were broken. And Shlomo Melech set out to put those walls back up. And Yeravim ben Nevat, as Chazal described in the Gemara, Yeravim ben Nevat came and he said to Shlomo Melech, what are you doing? You're not going to allow people to come. If someone has a din b'cheshvan against somebody and they need to come, bein dam l'dam, bein din l'din, bein neg l'nega, they're going to come to Har Bayis. And there's going to be a wall there. It's going to be a big hassle. I'm going to get in. They're going to let me in. Corona. They closed the Jaffa gate. I'm going to get in. Why are you building up walls around Yerushalayim? Make it easy for people to enter. And that was what Yeravim ben Nevat was yelling at Shlomo Melech. He was an Eved of Shlomo, and he says Shlomo Melech is making it hard for people to come up to Yerushalayim. You see what happened, that in the end, he was the one who made it hard for people to come to Yerushalayim. But listen to what was the machlokas about. The machlokas was Shlomo Melech wanted Shlomo Melech, who comes from who? Shlomo Melech, who comes from Leah, from David, from Yehuda, from Leah, the Alma de Iskasya. He's trying to close up Yerushalayim to make this private. It's a husband and a wife, the Rabbanu Shalom, and the Jewish people. We have a private affair. This is our house. And Shlomo Melech's closing up the walls of Yerushalayim. And Yeravim ben Nevat is saying, keep it open. Alma de Iskalia. Yeravim ben Nevat comes from Rachel Imenu. It's the Alma de Iskalia. He wants to make a Chag in Cheshvan in the month, which is Leah's month, which is the month of being quiet. And Yeravim ben Nevat says, how dare you close up the walls of Yerushalayim? You know what the Gemara says in Sanhedrin? The Gemara says he was right. There's room for the Alma de Iskalia. We need the Alma de Iskalia. But the Gemara says he was right to question Shlomo Melech. But what was the problem? What was the problem? Why was he? The Gemara says that Yeravim ben Nevat became he was the one who became the first king, not of Yehuda, of Yisrael. Yeravim eventually became the first Israelite king. And the Gemara says he got that as a reward for giving Shlomo Melech a shtach, even though he was his master. So the Gemara says, what was wrong about it? So the Gemara says that it was wrong because he should have given him that shtach in private, but he did it in public. He did it in public. Because that was Yeravim ben Nevat's whole inyan. That Yeravim ben Nevat's obsession with external, with making a chag, making a communal gathering in Cheshvan when it's supposed to be silent, when it's supposed to be quiet, and we're supposed to be in this world of the Alma Iskasya. And so, we'll end with this. The Gemara says the tragic ending of Yeravim ben Nevat. The tragic ending of Yeravim ben Nevat is that the Rabbanu Shalom came to Yeravim ben Nevat and he said to him, Yeravim ben Nevat, you could still turn this around. And the lashon of the Gemara is also very compelling, I think. The Gemara says that the Rabbanu Shalom grabbed Yeravim ben Nevat by his clothing. clothing is the externals. He grabbed them by the clothing, by the begadim, by the clothing is the external thing that covers over the person. And that's the outside. So we're covering ourselves with this clothing, but it's what's representing the outside. And he grabs him by the clothing, and he says, "Yoram ben Nevat, you could still do tshuva. Chazer b'cha," which itself is a funny lashon. Chazer b'cha. Go chazer b'cha. Stop posting so much to Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Chazer b'cha. Return inside to yourself, to who you are when you're by yourself. Chazer b'cha. And you and me and Ben Yishai could be matayal together in Gan Eden, the Gemara says in Sanhedrin. You and me and Ben Yishai will all be matayal together in Gan Eden. And Yoram ben Nevat's tragic answer to the Ribono Shel Olam is he says, and now you see it's everything we've been speaking about. Yoram ben Nevat says back to the Ribono Shel Olam, he says, Umi barosh, and we walk together, who's going to be in front? That's the whole Indian of Yoram ben Nevat. Who's going to be in front? And Hashem says, Ben Yishai Barosh. Ben David Barosh. The Alma de Iskasya, that hidden world that becomes impregnated, and that it's going to be first. And he says, not interested. So the Ribono Shel Olam should help us that we're entering into the month of Cheshvan. It's not quite there. We're still in Tishrei, we're getting together, we're celebrating together. But the Ribono Shel Olam should help us, Hashem should give us strength, that we should be able to take the month of Cheshvan seriously, to follow the advice of Rav Shimshon Raphael Hirsch and Rav Schwab and the Rambam and the Yaris Davash and Chazal. To enter into this rainy month, like the Dayan was talking about, the month where we cover ourselves halachically appropriately by oilim, not on Shabbos, and in the proper way on Shabbos. Cover ourselves in a proper way, and to recognize that there's something special about this hidden world that we all have. That we all have a hidden world, and Hashem should give us strength to be able to go through this month that's coming, Haba Aleinu L'Tova, Od Ma'at, and to enter into a state of whispering, into a state of being able to have a private relationship with Hashem that goes on top of and in addition to the beautiful revealed world that we're building together as a kehillah. So we'll end with a niggun, and I wish you a good evening. Shabbos Kodesh, 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 Shabbos Kodesh. Yismichu b'malchuscha, yismichu b'malchuscha. Shomei Shabbos yikorei yonei, yikorei yonei. Shabbos Kodesh, Shabbos Kodesh, Shabbos Kodesh, Shabbos Kodesh, Shabbos Kodesh, Shabbos Kodesh, Shabbos Kodesh. I'm gonna give. This is what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna give a 5-minute break so anyone who needs to escape can escape, and then I'll sing maybe 2 more songs. Shkoyach Gadol. Thank you for staying so late.
Oh, yeah. One of my oldest.
Really?
Why do you not find
What a special person. I was zochet to spend Shabbos with him a few times also in the Spanish-Portuguese shul. Do you speak to him ever?
Yeah.
Please send regards. Please send regards. Please send regards. And I didn't get to see him. I saw him occasionally. I was teaching a little when I was in the States. Yeah. So I saw him occasionally. He was giving shiurim in Heichal Torah, which is this new yeshiva in Kinneh. He would come to give to older people, and I would see him in the hallway. And I never got to say goodbye. And he knew I was sick. He saw me. I mean, he knew what I looked like. And he saw me without any facial hair, without any eyebrows. But please send warm regards. Thank you so much.
Thank you for giving me the option.
Yeah, very important to give people the option to escape. Chodesh Shabbat. No one to sleep, okay? She's Chaim.
Yeah, I was there. Someone needed a bandit.
And the wives get to hang out during the day. The husbands get to hang out during the day. It's still recording, I think. So
Yeah.